Oh yes, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the 2PM Project. Chris Scabati is my name. It's great to have your company here again. We have opening titles, no expense spared here at the Interchange. So much money went into those titles. It's great to have you back. We are streaming live to our Facebook site and our YouTube homepage. If you haven't seen this show before, the 2PM Project, the intent behind it is really to equip you with the evidence-based tools and techniques to help you navigate through this crazy world. It's still a crazy world. I hope we're coming out of it sometime soon, but there's still plenty to go. I hope you are keeping safe, and I hope you've been enjoying the shows that we're streaming here each week at Interchange. This is an interactive show, in case you haven't seen it. So on the right-hand side, I believe, of YouTube and of Facebook, there's an opportunity for you to type in your comments. We've got some excellent guests here this week. You can type a question for them and we'll get back to those questions at the end of the episode. We won't run for about 45 minutes, so please stick around. There will be questions towards the end of the show. Make sure you subscribe as well. There's an opportunity to subscribe through YouTube, or else you can go to our website at www.interchange.com.au. Today, we're going to talk about leadership during this COVID-19 pandemic, and we have some fantastic guests here today. My first guest this morning is Greg Graham, who is Chief Executive of WesTrac in New South Wales and ACT. Greg, are you there? Yes. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Chris.
Hey, welcome to the show. We'll get back to you in a second. It's so fantastic to hear your thoughts on this topic today, Greg. We also have Rebecca Supierz, HR Director for Seek Australia and New Zealand and Asia Pacific Product and Technology. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time here today. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this also. As always, I'm joined by my Interchange colleague, Managing Director and Founder, Gabrielle Harris. Gabe.
Chris.
Hello. Welcome back. As always, we dissect the hot topic, and this week it's on leadership during this COVID-19 pandemic. And in Australia, this show is called the 2PM Project, but in Canada, they call it the 10PM Project because we are crossing to the Canadian Rockies. Our musical guest today, Pat Carrick, is coming from British Columbia, Canada. Pat! So fantastic to have you here, my friend. I can't wait to hear you play later on and hear about your experience. A literal expat, pun intended, over in Canada, to hear about his experience and to hear him play. My first guest has more than 30 years' experience in the capital equipment sector in a diverse range of roles, including sales, operations and senior leadership positions across Australia and Europe. Since 2013, he has been Chief Executive of WesTrac, New South Wales and ACT, one of the largest authorised CAT equipment dealers in the world. Greg Graham, welcome to the 2PM Project.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Greg, it's like I said, it's going to be very interesting to hear your thoughts on this topic. It has been a particularly challenging time for leaders across the globe, not just in a particular region or in a particular country. There's a lot of senior executives going through this challenging time. In what ways have you found leadership challenging in this period?
So like a lot of organisations, we have the normal business continuity plans and all of those plans, but to quote the famous Mike Tyson saying, everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face. And when you stand those plans up is when you really test how robust they are, but also how robust your people are in the execution of those plans. So that was, I guess, the initial challenge, and then trying to scale the problem in such a rapidly evolving data set around what was the response from the government, what was the expected response from industry, how do we deal with the anxiety that all of this creates amongst our people. So there was sort of, we were taking fire on a number of fronts there, and I think it was really important to keep a cool head in that situation, and people are looking to leaders for an indication that they understand what the magnitude of that threat is and to scale the response appropriately. So that was, I think, the initial important thing to address as an organisation and as a group of leaders with our people here.
So, Greg, I mean, what we are seeing in this business is there's a lot of business who've invested in their culture prior to this unusual time rearing its ugly head. The business who invested in the culture prior to this seem to be the ones that are coming out of this in a better state. Now, obviously, businesses spend a great deal of time on things like system and process and governance and, you know, tangible things that they can work on. But it's often the neglected areas of culture, like behaviours and mindset and relationships. The businesses that have invested their time in those areas seem to be the ones that are doing particularly well coming out of this. I know you to be a man who's taken great care of this in the past in the businesses that you have worked in. So I'm assuming you would agree with this, but I'm very interested to hear how you have been addressing these areas in the WesTrac culture.
Yeah, so we set out initially to create 3 pillars to our response. The first one was to obviously protect our people from risk. The second one was to make sure that our business remains sustainable. And the third one was to make sure that our customers' businesses remain sustainable. So they were the 3 pillars that we built our response around. We linked that to what we call our Spark values, which are the ones that we've developed over the last couple of years, which revolve around safety, pride, accountability, respect, and the customer. And we know that, as you say, Chris, that values drive behaviours, and it's how you link your behaviours in these responses that illustrate to people whether you are living those values as a leadership team or whether you're using them as some sort of crutch for some other bad behaviours. So we were keen to make sure those 3 pillars could be easily linked and visibly linked by our people to the behaviours that the leadership team developed as we brought the response to bear on the situation.
I imagine with a pretty long career in the capital equipment sector, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Greg, but I reckon you must feel like you've seen almost everything come through. This is a totally unusual time, a time that, we don't have any rule book to this phase that we're going through. When a situation presents such as this, something that we have never encountered before, we sometimes find ourselves diverting back into old ways of leading, old habits and probably bad habits in some cases. I wonder how you've gone through this period with your leadership, also with the executive team, and what do you think you may have done better as a result?
Yeah, so I think, you've worked with us, Chris, and so has Gabe, and one of the things that I've had to address in my leadership style has been a little bit prone to a directive style of leadership. And I think early on in the process, when we stood up our crisis management team, which was our New South Wales leadership team plus some legal and IT support as well, I was certainly guilty of not letting the members of the leadership team address issues that they are more than capable of addressing themselves, overly directive, and cut those people off. And then when I went away and thought about how I'd acted in that situation, it prompted me to just go back in the next day and say to those 2 individuals in front of the group, first of all, that I apologised for the way that I acted, that it was inconsistent with the values and behaviours that we were espousing as an organisation, and that I was going to hand back the decision rights on those issues to them, and they should do what they felt was the appropriate thing because they were their people and their issues that were impacted. So I think it's very easy to think of these things as a military sort of command and control centre, when what you actually have to do is harness the capabilities and experience of your people, rather than think that you're on your white charger directing the Battle of Waterloo sort of thing. That's a very easy trap to fall into, I think, as a leader. People do look to you for leadership, but they also look for you to enable their abilities and them to apply the leadership knowledge and experience that they have to that situation. So that was certainly a weakness of mine early on in the process. I think having, probably better to have that early on, that recognition of that weakness rising to the surface, than getting to the end of the process. And when you do the post-mortem, everyone goes to town on you and says, we could have done things a whole lot better if you'd got your act together early on and not been a little dictator. So, I think lots of introspection, in amongst all the activity it's actually been a good thing. And I think the other thing is the work we've done on values. The leadership team has been incredibly cohesive and level-headed in quite a difficult set of circumstances. So having those values as an anchor and a test point for your own behaviour has been very valuable for us.
That's great, Greg. I love hearing this from leaders when they have a moment of honesty and self-reflection like that. It brings a great authenticity to you as an individual. It's something we always try and encourage the younger leaders that we work with to take on board. There's great strength in that. I wonder, continuing on, that train of thought, what do you think you've learned so far about yourself or the way that the business operates through this time that may possibly become permanent as a result of this period? I mean, do you have an idea about what may become the new normal for you or for WesTrac?
Well, I think we've got about 1,500 people in New South Wales, and around 300 of those people have been working from home. A lot of our people need to come to work because we have workshops and warehouses, distribution centres that need to be, manned. There's no easy way around making that work remote at all. So one of the key things has been for the people who've remained here, their willingness to be a part of the solution. We've had one positive test from someone who'd been on a cruise but hadn't returned to work. So, our protocol stood us in pretty good stead there. But other than that, we've had really good compliance with most of the measures we've put in place. And we haven't had any adverse feedback that they're a waste of time or who came up with this idea sort of thing. So I think one of the things that's really shone through is the work we did on culture has actually permeated deep into the organisation. And that's been a really welcome finding. It's very easy when you're in a small cohort of leaders that everyone thinks it's a great thing. You need to get out and, I've spent some time across all of our shifts talking to people in the workshops and in the warehouses, and they've been pretty complimentary of the way it's been handled by the leadership team, but they also know that they have a part to play in it themselves. This is not just a leadership exercise. This is 1,500 people getting on board with the idea because they know it's the right thing to do. And so that's been a real learning for us. And I think what that does is it should enable us to, push authority and responsibility deeper into the organisation than we probably have in the past, with the fundamental belief that most people are here to do the right thing. You can actually give people a lot more scope and meaning to their role in the organisation simply by letting go of some of that control mechanism that really doesn't do you a lot of good in the long term and just creates a bit of an enforcement culture.
Thank you, Greg. I've been speaking with Greg Graham, who is the Chief Executive of WesTrac, New South Wales and ACT. Greg, we're going to come back to you in a second, but thank you so much again for being a part of the show today. I'd like to bring in my second guest here, Rebecca Supierz. Rebecca is the HR Director at Seek Australia, New Zealand and Asia Pacific Product and Technology. Before joining Seek in 2013, Rebecca spent 9 years working at Telstra, leading teams across global contact centres, Telstra Digital, Retail and Consumer, as well as the engineering functions. Rebecca, welcome to the 2PM project. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Look, Seek is a really diverse business and it has great diversity in its workforce. Can you tell us a little bit about that and also what transitioning from working at the office to home has been like, and then obviously what it'll be like to transition back?
Well, I'd love to be able to answer the second part of your question with some knowledge. I think that's the million-dollar question going on in Australia right now about what is it going to look like to move back. We are a really diverse workforce, both from the type of people that work at Seek. So we have everybody from extremely technical data scientists and technology architects right through to customer service people, user experience designers, HR, finance. So we are a really diverse organisation. Here in Australia and New Zealand, we're about 1,000 people, but we also have a large number of teams located globally. So across our Asia space. We are one Asia-Pacific organisation. So as kind of COVID-19 pandemic has happened, we've had to consider really our Asia-Pacific business as a whole and try and be consistent, even though there has been difference in government statements. I mean, we've seen that alone in the Australia country where states have been at odds sometimes with the federal government. But certainly then when you're operating in an Asia context where you are seeing different governments have very different ways of operating and very different cultural contexts, we've had to be really thoughtful about the approach we've had. We are a bit different to WesTrac, where we have been able to switch on the fully remote working relatively quickly. We have really awesome tools and technology. We have a culture of quite a flexible workforce, mainly in Australia and New Zealand. In Asia, there are some parts that are flexible and some parts that are less so for a range of reasons. But I've just been so incredibly impressed at how quickly the organisation has been able to switch to remote working. Our Melbourne office, where 90% of our employees are located, has been closed for a number of weeks now. And we're just starting now to think about, well, what would a return to the office look like, and how would we start to manage that?
Look, it must have been such an interesting time for you, particularly in the HR area with a greatly, an enormously diverse business such as Seek. For you personally, some of the big challenges that you've faced as an HR director during this time, can you reflect on some of those big challenges that you've been through?
Certainly. Look, there's so many, and I have said many a time to our CEO, in the yearly crisis management that we do as a leadership team and as an executive team, it's never HR at the centre, and we have never trained for a global health pandemic. So next year, I feel like we are done and dusted and do not need to practice anymore. It's always on data security or some other type of breach, and I've got a very small role to play. Look, I think I will first say it's definitely not only me. We've had an incredible team of my global HR leader, as well as a number of different people within the HR team. I think we've faced challenges of, firstly, supporting the organisation, but also I'm a leader myself of a team of people who have a whole range of diverse needs, and some business as usual things still continue. So we still have some employee issues. We've still got change programs. We've got really important priorities for the business that we are focusing on. And so some of those challenges have been really tough. I think the uncertainty and trying to lead through the uncertainty has probably been the biggest challenge. So focusing on things like being super clear in communications. I felt similar to Greg mentioned, we saw employees looking to us as employers and to us as leaders for clarity, because when there isn't clarity and the media is saying one thing and you're hearing things from state government or federal government or health organisations, and that's a comment, I suppose, globally, there's lots of different information out there. And I think people were certainly looking for, well, where can I go to what I know to be true? How do I find the information that tells me this little piece is not changing? And that's why we made the decision, I think, quite early to close our office and have people working from home, because people were kind of looking to us to say, what should I be doing? And so by creating clarity for people, that really helped. But I think the immense workload, trying to be a support not only to teams, but also my own team, my own family, trying to take care of myself, that's certainly been the challenge that I've experienced.
Well, I mean, you've already touched on some of these. This was going to be my next question, but I mean, what do you see as some of the opportunities during this time for yourself as either an individual or as a business?
Well, if I start as an individual, I think I'm trying to turn my mind now that we are out of some of the kind of really operational day-to-day. We know that our people are all safe. We know that people are being as productive as they can from home. We are trying to support, particularly in Victoria, where there is remote schooling. We are trying to help people balance working from home and remote schooling. I can now turn to a bit of reflection. I think the opportunities for me, my partner and I, my husband and I, are trying to think about what are the things that we've really loved during this time. So I saw a beautiful article the other day calling this the great pause for the world, and I really love that term and I'm trying to hold on to that. I'm loving the walk to kinder 3 times a week. That's really beautiful. And so how do I think about that, holding on to that in the new, whatever the new normal phase 2 is when I head back to the office? Spending a bit more time at home, I think, not a commute, and so trying to exercise, those kind of things on the personal front are there. I think it's allowed me to think about different ways to connect. So I'm naturally an extrovert, and that has been proven and reinforced during this working from home period. I need people around me to have my energy. And so I think learning different ways to connect through a screen, through a phone, has been really awesome for me. And I think as a business, we are thinking about, as I said, we're naturally quite a flexible organisation, and our work lends ourselves. We don't have workshops like Greg does. But how do we continue to engage and think about our culture differently in a more remote? Because I anticipate that now the world really has proven that in many cases remote working can be done, and potentially where organisations didn't think it could be done before, which I think is a wonderful opportunity for this country in particular. How do we hold on to our culture and think about that and create points of connectivity for people in a more remote way?
So, I mean, I'll ask the same question that I asked of Greg too. You know, what considerations have you made? Some of the temporary changes that you've made, have you considered making them more permanent? And there's a couple that I can think of, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on this one. What lessons have you learned that could improve the business, both financially and for the people who work for Seek?
Well, one of the things I think we're super proud of is our response to our customers. And as awful as the bushfires were, we put in place some customer packages really, really fast, and that allowed that team to get together and kind of use a template to come together really quickly and come up with some really wonderful support packages for our customers. So I think that gave everybody good confidence that whilst we are still a large-ish organisation, when it really comes to the crunch, we can turn things around and hold on to our status, our customer focus. I think the remote working is really interesting. We will have that as a pillar of our transition back to the new normal program of work that we will kick off in the next couple of weeks. So what does remote working look like for Seek? We're also moving to a new building. So physically, the start of next year, we are building a brand new building in Cremorne here in Victoria. And we want to think about actually the way we were thinking about our building and our office. Does that need to change right now? And probably. Do we think about elements of our culture that we need to think about in a remote context? Absolutely. The other piece I think that's really important to reference is mental health and wellbeing. So as a challenge for an organisation, and certainly as a HR practitioner, that is something that we have been really focused on, making sure that individuals have the skills and tools that they need, leaders have the tools that they need to support those people who are working from home, because it's harder, obviously, to check in on someone via Zoom. It's easier to see if they don't turn up to the office. You can give them a phone call. But I think that's something that wellbeing for us as a priority was there under our diversity, inclusion and wellbeing strategy, but it's certainly bubbled up as a key priority for us over this time, and we're making sure we can do all that we can. So I think that will continue also.
Fascinating. I've been speaking with Rebecca Supierz, who is the HR Director at Seek Australia, New Zealand and Asia Pacific Product and Technology. Rebecca, thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you in a second.
A pleasure.
So interesting to get people's perspectives at this time. It's a great topic, leadership during this time. I wonder how you've been going. As I mentioned, this is an interactive show. If you are a leader, I'd love to hear your thoughts. There's opportunity to write some comments down there on the right-hand side of both our YouTube stream and our Facebook stream. Gabrielle Harris, my colleague, Managing Director and Founder at Interchange, going to bring you in. Gabe, earlier I spoke with Greg about how we're seeing in our business, the businesses who've invested in their culture prior to this pandemic are the ones who seem to be coming out of it the best. Businesses who have invested their time and energy more so in their people, in mindset, relationships, behaviours. What have you been hearing from business leaders about the leadership challenges that they are facing during this time?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think it's been a really interesting time for all organisations, without a doubt. And as you say, of those that certainly that we work with on a regular basis, it's been really interesting to see how different businesses are moving through this based on the work that they had done prior to the introduction of COVID-19 into our society. I think primarily when you think about culture, it's really, or we see it to be made up of two parts, and we base that on most of the org psych theory that's available. which really suggests that 25 to 30% is made up in the systems, the processes, policies, procedures, and the governance of an organisation. But the rest, that 70-ish%, if you like, is really made up of behaviours, like you were talking about before. That be leadership behaviours, and obviously all of that is influenced through our mindsets, but also our values, which Greg spoke about earlier. And certainly what I'm hearing a lot of at the moment in the execs that I'm working with is in the initial stages of the COVID response, it really sat in that 30%. It was, what are the procedures, what are the policies, what are the things that we need to shift in order to move through this? And quite rightly, because you need to have that framework in order for the other stuff to flourish. But what we're observing now is that those that have had a lot of focus on values, that have done a lot of work in leadership behaviour, are actually able to bring those renewed policies and procedures to the fore, and they are faring better through this journey. But I think the other interesting point to pick up on is actually Bex, and that is that even coming out of this, work is going to need to be done on what is the new culture that's required to lead the new normal. And we're all going to have elements of change in our approach to how we run our businesses. You would hope so, because we want to learn from this process. We don't want to come out the other side and just be like we were before. This is a fantastic opportunity. And I think a lot of the leaders that have done the work around leadership behaviour, organisational behaviour, are recognising that now is the time to harness that thinking around what's the culture that we're going to need moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gabe. I'm going to bring all of our guests back in. Greg Graham, Rebecca Supierz, and Gabrielle Harris. Gabe, I know you've been sitting listening there, and I know you've always got some thoughts. Do you have a question for Greg based on some of the things he was talking about earlier?
I do have many questions for Greg, but I won't come back them all at the same time. Greg's used to this. How are you feeling, Greg?
I'm good, Gabe, thanks.
So, Greg, my question for you is, looking back a few months on the journey so far, what advice would you give to yourself? Thinking back to February, perhaps, what would be the advice that you'd give to yourself now?
Look, I think it's probably just to, take a deep breath and draw as much data in as you can about where you're at. I mean, the situation assessment was very difficult because there was so much, information flying around, and from, as Beck said, lots of different government sources, probably some of them at odds with each other. So, how do you form the situation assessment and then derive your plan from there? Because that all the continuity planning that we had had probably the more typical disruptors to a business like ours in it. We certainly didn't have, as Beck said, pandemic was a fair way down the list, if it was even on there. So it was that, how do you have a plan but remain agile at the same time? Because if you can't respond quickly to that circumstance, then whatever handrail you've created through your business continuity plans is going to be useless to you. And then the other one just goes back to, just be a little more reflective of your own behaviour and standards as you lead the team in the early stages, and know when to shut up and move on.
One more for you, Greg. I'm really interested, and perhaps in a slightly indulgent way, about what was the stickiest part or the most beneficial part to you of the cultural work that you'd done historically that's helped with moving through this crisis period?
When I look at that, I think it was probably the depth to which we took the culture piece in our business. So many of our people participated in the workshops in some way, shape or form, that when we started to talk about having the 3 pillars and linking them to our values and behaviours, no one had to sort of go, well, I haven't heard that before. It was sort of deep enough in the organisation, and people were aligned with it. And the change that we've seen in our engagement scores since we started working with you. People just got on board, and it wasn't like we had to explain ourselves about why we were doing something or the way in which we were addressing it. Everyone understood that. The baseline understanding was very robust, and people just came along with us without having to be, coerced into a certain course of action. That was particularly, if I look back and thought about where we were, say, 5 years ago, that's a very stark contrast to, I think, what we would have had to deal with, say, in 2014 or 15.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Greg. Gabe, how about a question without notice for Rebecca?
Well, likewise, Beck, I'm really curious to know a bit about what you've learned about your own leadership as you've moved through this period.
Thanks, Gabe. Lots is the kind of short answer. I spoke before about my need for people around me, which has certainly come to the forefront. I think so. Therefore, I think linking to relationships and how much importance I place on relationships, I have certainly struggled as I had a few new starters in my direct team. We've had a few new executives join. So finding different ways and being able to adjust on how I build relationships, which is usually through, time together, humour, shared experiences, that feels very different. So I've had to really adjust there because these relationships I need to have are really critical for both now and ongoing. I think if I reflect as well, and similar to Greg, I know that something that I'm continuously working on is my pace and how I can jump ahead and come up with a solution and forget sometimes to take my team or those I'm working with along with me. And a crisis kind of is perfect for those kind of people just to continue to do that, right? Because things are moving. So I've really had to try and slow down, even when there's been asks and expectations to move really fast, to make sure that I'm bringing particularly those in my team, like my business partners, HR business partners, they're at the front line of answering questions from employees and leaders. And so making sure I continue to slow down, remember the context, tell the story in a way so they're equipped to go and feel successful and do their job in a really good way.
Rebecca, I might throw this one to you. This is a question that's come in from one of our viewers on YouTube. The question is, Greg, we might even go to you after this, but I'll ask you first, Rebecca. What is a key factor in getting the buy-in of your people during a time of crisis? What's a key factor?
It's a really great question. I think there's a couple of things that we've focused on. Clarity of communication and making sure that you do not have differing messages coming from different people. So that means leaders, if you've made a decision that leaders are making decisions together, they're then unified as they come out of those conversations. That's really important. And I think not introducing anything new. So similar to Greg's point, we use this as an opportunity to really reinforce our culture. And one of the principles we had about how we managed the crisis was that we wouldn't do anything that was counterculture. And so by calling that out, and we made that really clear to our employees, I think as an individual, we can go, okay, well, I know what the culture is, so therefore that's not changing. And it's less to think about in terms of that cognitive load of all of the stuff that's going on for people.
Great. Greg Graham, can I throw to you? Same question. What's a key factor in getting the buy-in of your people during a time of crisis?
Yeah, I think for us, Chris, it's been about communication and the nature and style of it, the consistency of the messaging. So we've had some fantastic people in our team working on that. So we have, a couple of videos a week from me. We have some leaders comms that we push out through the line managers. We have emails. We send out about 1,400 texts with links to that video so that people can click through from their phone. And the take up on that has been very solid, and it's actually turned it on its ear. I mean, the text with the link to the video has been the most used and accessed form of communication through the whole process. So, and that, it's just about making sure that people understand that we not only do we have a grip on the situation, but we understand their concerns and how are we addressing that. And it's also been, for me, just spending a bit of time on the floor. So, we've got 90 or 100 apprentices in New South Wales, making sure, they're all going, well, what's the impact of this on the duration of my apprenticeship, all of these sort of things, making sure that, if you get a question like that off the floor, that you go back and personally answer it, make sure that people understand that you're out there for a reason and it's not just to, be seen, it's actually to deal with their concerns and address them.
My special guests today, Greg Graham from WesTrac and Rebecca Supierz from Seek. It's been a pleasure hearing your thoughts on this topic. Thank you, Gabe, as well, for your thoughts too. We're going to go to our musical act now. You would think that we would just go local. No, we've got to go much further than that. We're heading out to the Canadian Rockies into British Columbia. Our musical guest today, Pat Carrick, coming to us from the Canadian Rockies. Pat, you are there. So it's now nearly 11 o'clock over in Canada, isn't it? It hasn't been a particularly busy week for you, has it? What's been going on in your world?
Oh, well, quite a bit actually, but I welcomed my son into the world just this time last week. An interesting time to bring some new life into the world, but I'm very relieved to say that everything went well.
That's
and he's very happy and healthy.
Congratulations. So Patrick is the founder of Columbia Valley Drumming. He's an expat from Victoria. It's so great to actually speak to someone, well, literally over the other side of the world. How is life for you over there? I know it's been a busy week, and congratulations, but how have you been dealing with this change?
Yeah, it's been a dramatic change for myself as a musician and somebody who is their bread and butter, sharing music with people. It has been a significant change for myself. I run integrative community drum circles all throughout the Canadian Rockies, and in particular a little place called the Columbia Valley. And so, yeah, it's been a challenge for sure because with these drum circles, I invite members of the community to come down and play all different types of instruments, mainly drums, like the one you see behind me. And it is a wonderful way for people to de-stress, get away from their busy lives and connect with people in a certain way that you can't normally do that. And it's been very beneficial for a lot of people in this area for me to come to their town on a regular basis and run these sessions. So it was a considerable letdown with everything going on, but I've adjusted and I've coped with it, and really my focus has just been purely on my family right now and just kind of hunkering down. And in a lot of respects, there's probably no better time to welcome a newborn and just kind of get into that little love bubble and focus on family. So that's been really good, and I'm just really trying to focus on all the positives that I can about this, including the fact that he's happy and healthy.
And it is fantastic, and it is the perfect time. You do have a bit of time on your hands, which is no doubt very helpful in this time. But I wonder, and I like asking this of the musicians that come on, it's a really tough time. Some people that we've spoken with, some of the performing artists that have come on have said, look, it's actually making me really creative. It's making me get down and use the time effectively. A lot of other people, and probably the majority, are the ones who've said, I don't feel creative in this moment. How creative do you feel at this time?
Look, not very, but at the same time, with everything that I kind of focus in on, a lot of it is based on personal connection and people being in the same room. So whilst I could get onto the internet and play the drums and play the guitar and I really compliment any musician who's out there doing that, my particular style of what I do with these drum circles really is based on people being together and connecting face to face in the same room and playing the instruments all together as one. So, and that's the case for a lot of people. But really, I haven't had too much time to focus on writing music and doing all those types of things, which I also enjoy doing, because I've just had a lot on my plate, in my personal life, not so much my professional.
And this time, Patrick, does it make you miss your extended family more or miss Australia more? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, there's always an element of me missing Australia, missing my home and my family, and that happens on a regular basis. And unfortunately, my parents were due to come tomorrow for a visit to visit the newborn. So a lot of opportunities have been taken away because of COVID-19. As well, I couldn't actually be in the same room when my baby was born, and that was something that was kind of taken away. But again, all the staff there at the hospital were fantastic. My family will be able to see my baby in time, and we couldn't live in a better period for this, because they can see. I can connect with them visually at the very least, and in time, I'm optimistic that I'll be able to travel back to Australia and share this bundle of joy and just kind of reconnect with my family in good time.
Well, we are very lucky and very fortunate to have you join us here today. This is Patrick Carrick coming to us from the Canadian Rockies in British Columbia. Pat, do you want to tell us a little bit about the song you've chosen for today and why, and then you can launch into it?
Yeah, well, this is a song that I wrote myself. It's still a work in progress, but it's very much a song of optimism. Every summer, obviously being on this side of the hemisphere, we're going into the summer months, and what we'd like to do is hitch up our trailer and go up into the backwoods onto a beautiful lake called Hall Lake. And I kind of began fiddling with this last summer, and now that the baby's arrived, I've been inspired to continue and finish it up. But it's not quite there yet. But at the same time, I thought it's a nice little optimistic look, and maybe for people to reflect on their own families.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, well, take it away.
Blue skies and dragonflies on a day in mid-July. Dancing trees sway about the breeze. They say hey and I say hi. And I don't have a care in the world, 'cause I'm at Hall Lake with my boys and my girl. It's a little reminder nothing could be more finer than now. 4 chords and paddle boards, I feel the grass between my toes. Catching frogs on lying logs. What's the time? Well, no one knows. And I don't have a care in the world, 'cause I'm at Hall Lake with my boys and my girl. It's a little reminder nothing could be more finer than now. We'll call up work and say we're staying one more day, and we'll take the time and waste it all away. Take the time and waste it all away. 'Cause I don't have a care in the world, 'cause I'm at Hall Lake with my boys and my girl. It's a little reminder reminder nothing could be more finer than now.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's Patrick Carrick coming all the way from British Columbia in Canada. It's kind of surreal to think that you're over the other side of the world. It looks like you're just next door here in Fitzroy. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of the show. Thank you to our special guest speakers, Greg Graham, Chief Executive of WesTrac New South Wales and the ACT. Thank you for your time today, Greg. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. Catch up with you in Newcastle sometime soon. Also, thank you to Rebecca Supierz, the HR Director at Seek Australia, New Zealand and Asia Pacific Product and Technology. Rebecca, thank you so much for your thoughts today. It was really interesting having that conversation with you, and I wish you all the best for bringing all your people back to work.
Thanks.
Thank you also to our house band today, Pat Carrick, all the way from the Canadian Rockies in British Columbia. I was going to say stay warm, but you're kind of going into warm. We need some of that warm. So thanks so much for your time. Congratulations on your little fella coming into the world, and we'll catch up with you again sometime. Thanks, Pat. Thank you also to my Interchange colleague, Gabrielle Harris. We'll see you next week, Gabe. Cheerio. And finally, my great thanks to the show's producer, Double Leopard, Emma Grace. Give us a wave, Emma. Give us a wave. It is a warm leopard. Oh. Anyway, she's a warm leopard. It's just a single leopard, but she's got one on today. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the 2 p.m. Project. Please make sure you subscribe either through our Facebook or our YouTube pages, or you can go to interchange.com.au. There is a subscription page there. You'll be sent automatic links to our show each week. We can also customize this show, as we are doing for some other businesses, a show exactly for your business with your guests and your musical acts. Please contact us at interchange.com.au. Thank you so much to all my guests today. It's been a pleasure having your company this Friday afternoon. Stay warm if you're in Melbourne. It's freezing. Chris Kabadi is my name. I'm looking forward to seeing you for another episode of the 2 p.m. Project next Friday at 2 p.m. In the meantime, stay safe. I really mean that.